Only one American president was born on Independence Day, Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States, born on July 4, 1872. The future president was born and raised in this tiny, remote village, Plymouth Notch, Vermont. His mother Victoria and his father John were also born and raised here on neighboring farms. Plymouth Notch was a hill farm community, and Coolidge was shaped by the values of his family and the people of this small community, the values of thrift, honesty, hard work, and self-reliance. How this man became president is the remarkable story of a farm boy from rural America who studied in a one-room schoolhouse, who learned that success came from hard work, and who overcame the grief of losing his mother when he was 12. To this day, the village where Coolidge was born retains its early 20th century beauty. Set on a rise somewhat higher than the valley floor, with its old white houses and weathered barns amid farm fields, Plymouth Notch appears today much as it did in the time when Coolidge was president. The country store run by his father sits on the corner. Coolidge was born in the L attached to the back of the store. The future president lived here until he was 4. The L has been restored to look as it did on the 4th of July, 1872. The Coolidge homestead where he grew up is just across the street. His father, a farmer, a merchant, a legislator, and a businessman, founded the cheese factory just up the road. The post office where his stepmother Carrie Brown worked is still the post office, and the porch of the homestead where young Calvin often sat with his family still looks inviting. The Union Christian Church, built in 1840 in the Greek Revival style, 32 years before Coolidge's birth, is directly across the street from the homestead. It's a church founded in the Congregational tradition, which traces its origins back to the Puritans who settled much of New England, including Plymouth Notch. The community worshipped here, and it is still a house of worship today. The Coolidges were active members. President Coolidge's stepmother played the church organ and taught Sunday school. A plaque and an American flag mark the Coolidge pew, where the future president sat with his mother, father, his sister Abby, and after his mother died, his stepmother. The church functioned as a community building as well. Here, Calvin watched school district meetings, his first insights into public life. In the 1890s, a local artisan, Willie Pierce, gave the church its Carpenter Gothic-style interior. It's a masterwork of design and carpentry, with thousands of separate pieces of wood in its beaded tongue and groove construction. The pine was cut from the forest around the village, and the woodwork was sawn at the local mill. The church possesses fine acoustics. A person seated in any location hears clearly both the preacher and musical performances. The Este pump organ, added in 1900, is still played. Shutters and the iron railings were added to the church facade in the 1930s. The church was given to the Calvin Coolidge Memorial Foundation in 1970. Whenever President Coolidge and his family came back to visit his father and Plymouth Notch, they attended Sunday services here. As the president's son John remembered, for his father, home is where the heart is, and Plymouth remained home to Coolidge throughout his life, no matter where his responsibilities took him. President Coolidge once remarked about growing up here, "It would be hard to imagine better surroundings for the development of a boy than I had." He knew everyone in the village. Midge Aldrich, who operated the tea room across from the store during his presidency, next-door neighbors and relatives, the Wilders, the Browns of his mother's family, who lived out toward the cemetery, and he was used to taking orders from the stern Aurora Pierce, who kept house and ruled the roost in the Coolidge home. While hill farm children had time for play, work was an essential part of life in rural Vermont in the late 19th century. Calvin learned from his father, grandfather, and other family members at an early age that he was expected to do his share. He helped in the fields and around the house. The future president started school in 1877 at age 5, the youngest child in the Notch one-room schoolhouse just up the hill from his home. On that first day, Calvin found himself in a room with 23 other students aged 5 to 18. Such country schools were ungraded and students learned at their own pace. Though hill farm people understood the importance of education, farm work came first. Farm life revolved around the turning of the seasons. School didn't start until mid-December when farming chores slowed down. Winter term ended late in February, so the farmers had plenty of help for sugaring season. Sugaring was an important part of the local hill farm economy. Lengthening days, warming sun, and continuing night frosts signaled it was time for the maple sap to run. Farmers took pride in the amount of amber syrup they boiled. The more syrup made, the more money. According to Calvin's father, a master sugar maker himself, Calvin could get more syrup from the sap than anyone else. When Calvin completed the 8th grade, encouraged by his father, he left farming behind and enrolled at Black River Academy in Ludlow, Vermont, the closest high school 11 miles away. Calvin never forgot the first morning he went away to school, recalling a mixture of anxiety and anticipation, saying it was one of the greatest events of his life. Coolidge graduated from Black River Academy in May of 1890 in a class of 5 boys and 4 girls. Black River Academy's principal, George Sherman, one of the few college-educated persons Calvin had met, suggested that he go to Amherst College in Massachusetts. After 2 months' preparation at St. Johnsbury Academy, he received a college entrance certificate and entered Amherst in the fall of 1891. Coolidge, upon graduation from Amherst in 1895, decided to read law and found a position in a Northampton, Massachusetts law firm. As he became a successful lawyer, he developed an interest in politics. He lost his first election running for the local school board. Shortly thereafter, he ran for representative to the Massachusetts legislature from Northampton and won. Later, he was elected state senator and was elected by fellow senators as president of the Massachusetts Senate. His political career flourished. He ran successfully for lieutenant governor and was twice elected governor of Massachusetts. Coolidge was considered something of a progressive governor and may have been content to stay in state politics, but fate intervened. In 1919, Boston police went on strike, and some looting and rioting resulted. Believing he was putting his career on the line, Coolidge called out the state guard to restore order and declared, "There is no right to strike against the public safety by anybody, anytime, anywhere." His firm opposition to the strike made him a national political figure. The Republican National Convention of 1920 chose him in a surprise move as vice presidential candidate on the ticket with Warren Harding. His vice presidential election in 1920 was his 17th straight election victory, a string of political successes stretching back to 1898. In the summer of 1923, Vice President Coolidge and his wife Grace, also a Vermonter, were visiting his father at Plymouth Notch when they received word that President Harding had become ill while traveling on the West Coast. In the middle of the night on August 2nd, a message stating that Harding had died reached the Bridgewater Telegraph Station 8 miles away. A banging on the Coolidge homestead door awakened Calvin's father, who was told that President Harding was dead. The colonel quickly woke the vice president and Grace. By the light of a single kerosene lamp, the father administered the presidential oath to the son in the homestead sitting room. In this dramatic and unprecedented way, Calvin Coolidge became the 30th President of the United States. Plymouth Notch was suddenly world famous. Coolidge's friends and neighbors gathered at the homestead later that morning to congratulate the new president. As he and Mrs. Coolidge left for Washington, they stopped at the Notch Cemetery where the new president visited his mother's grave. The president later said, "That morning she seemed very near to me." That evening, neighbors saw Colonel John sitting alone on the steps of his house. When questioned about Calvin's ability to serve, he answered, "I think he'll do fairly well. He did fairly well as governor, and I guess he'll do fairly well as president." When asked why he thought a notary public had the right to swear in a president, the colonel said, "Nobody told me I couldn't." Though Calvin Coolidge was off to the White House and had spent much of his adult life in Massachusetts, his love of Vermont remained strong, and no more so than on September 21, 1928, when as president he came home to view the ravages of the recent flood. The resilience of Vermonters in recovering from the disaster moved him to speak from the back of his train to a crowd gathered at Bennington. "Vermont is a state I love. I could not look upon the peaks of Ascutney, Killington, Mansfield, and Equinox without being moved in a way that no other scene could move me. It was here that I first saw the light of day. Here I received my bride. Here my dead lie pillowed on the loving breast of our everlasting hills. I love Vermont because of her hills and valleys, her scenery and invigorating climate, but most of all because of her indomitable people. They are a race of pioneers who have almost beggared themselves to serve others. If the spirit of liberty should vanish in other parts of the Union and support of our institutions should languish, it could all be replenished from the generous store held by the people of this brave little state of Vermont." The President Calvin Coolidge State Historic Site is a National Historic Landmark, managed and preserved by the Vermont Division for Historic Preservation. The Union Christian Church at Plymouth Notch is owned, operated, and lovingly maintained by the Calvin Coolidge Memorial Foundation. The foundation is the only membership organization devoted to preserving Coolidge history and to promoting research into Coolidge's life and era. Its office welcomes all those interested in Calvin Coolidge, his presidency, his family, his life and times. We would also like to welcome you as a member of the Coolidge Foundation. Information about membership is available, and please visit our website at www.calvin-coolidge.org. And thank you for visiting Plymouth Notch, still one of the loveliest places on all the earth, here beneath green mountains long known as the Coolidge Range, here where the Vermont hill farm culture flourished. Here in a town settled by Coolidges in 1780, that culture produced a farm boy who became President of the United States of America. The look of long ago is kept alive here, as is the still mighty promise, the dream of America.